Based on whom?
We got a big show for you tonight. You may have missed this incredible interview with the late Ron Gardner, where he goes into heavy detail about Area 51 and the infamous alien being by the name of J-Rod who escaped from it. We've got special guest panel Dr. J. Andy Elias along with Preston Dennett and myself as we question Ron Gardner about what he knows about the infamous Area 51 base and what lies beneath, and his relationship with Bob Lazar. Everybody enjoy. Mr. Gardner, I know with all your research over the many years you've investigated the phenomenon and your insight to what's going on in the secret government. Can you tell our listeners from the beginning? Let's get to Area 51. The bodies, are they?
That's a good idea. That's where everything is. It's really important. It's Area 51S4, though. It's not Area 51 proper. That's what people get mixed up about that. S4 is where they take all the hot stuff. It's about 15 miles southwest of Groom Lake proper in Papoose Mountain. It's 5 different levels, and those levels are where they keep all the super secret stuff. The craft are there. There's 9 craft there. The ET people, both live and dead, are there. Dr. Dan Burish, who's the main thrust of what I've been researching for the last 10 years, worked there on and off for 10 years. Your listeners probably know about Bob Lazar. Bob Lazar worked there maybe 3.5 months, so it's a big difference there. But as a journalist and a documentary filmmaker, when I interview people, I make sure that I have at least 2 and preferably 3 corroborations. So with the Dan Burish and the Bob Lazar and Bill Uhouse, the 3 people who actually worked at Area 51S4, so I have that corroboration from all 3 of them. I have them on my videos. I've interviewed Dr. Dan Burish for over 100 hours on camera. I've interviewed him 100 hours off camera. He's almost like my stepson. I've been involved with his story. I have 2 books that I've written and a 3rd one with his parents. So I know what's at Area 51. I know why the people are there and how long they've been there. I know all of that. So I always mention to UFO researchers to target your UFO freedom of information at Area 51S4. That's where the tissue samples of the ET people are. That's where all the films are. That's where all the audio is. They have hundreds of hours of our scientists working with the particular one that I'm focusing on is J-Rod. J-Rod. That's a code name that the military people gave this particular being who crash landed near Kingman, Arizona in 1953. There were either 3 or 4 beings that were on the ship. I think it was 3, but I've heard 4. 2 or 3 of them were taken to Los Alamos, but the one that I'm focusing on here, that particular J-Rod, was taken to Area 51S4. He was kept captive there for over 50 years. And at the 5th level down at Area 51S4 under Papoose Mountain. Now, I can flesh that out more. Do you have any questions you want to pose at this point, or shall I just continue?
Actually, before we were talking, you mentioned a difference between aliens and ETs, extraterrestrials. Can you tell all the listeners about that?
Yes, I'd be happy to. The main difference, or the difference, is that when Dr. Dan Burish talks about extraterrestrials, he said, I never met an alien, but I have met an extraterrestrial. I asked him 100 times, what's the difference? And his response is that the ET person is a real person. It's a person from the future. It has a very similar genome to humans alive today. 2 arms, 2 legs, large head, wraparound eyes, and so forth. But a alien, from his point of view, and now my point of view, because I'm focusing on what he says, is a being from another star system that has no genetic linkage to the human race. I don't know if you have that image from the Varginha case. There's an actual, from my humble opinion, that's an actual alien. It has red eyes, has protuberances on the head, and I went there 6 years ago with Dr. Roger Lear to try and interview the orthopedic surgeon that operated on that, what I consider an alien, because Dr. Roger Lear had talked to this particular orthopedic surgeon prior to our going down there, and at that time, the first interview, he said that there was tissue samples taken, there was he had a broken leg, so there was actual X-rays of the being. And so on my long list of things to do, I want to compare the genome of that, what we call an alien, in the Varginha case, which is like the Roswell of Brazil. It's a major case. I've written a book on it. I've got a documentary with Dr. Roger Lear, and compare that genome with the genome of the J-Rod. On my site right now, area51jrod.com, right at the top, you can see it says Q94 document. Well, that Q94 document is Dr. Dan Burish, one of the best microbiologists on the planet. The Q stands for his clearance, his security clearance, and 94 is when he wrote that particular document. And that document was leaked to someone on the inside of Area 51S4 out to Dr. Burish's now wife, Marcia McDowell. And then she leaked it to Bill Hamilton. Bill Hamilton and I were researching Area 51. He gave me that information, so that document is on my site. You can download it. And I'm hoping at some point that that we can actually compare these two. The particular scientist in Brazil is reluctant to come forward, but Dr. Roger Lear and I have sort of a game plan that we may be able to get that information. That being crashed in Brazil in 1996, and there was at least 2 and maybe 3 creatures there. In Brazil, the fire department is a part of the military. It isn't separated like it is here. So the fire department captured one of these aliens in a net and put it in a box on the back of their truck. The military rolls up with the guns and say, we want to take control of it, which they did, and took it to a small hospital near where they were that wasn't adequate, and they took it to a major hospital. And when they took the being into the operating room, because it had a major compound fracture, the military put guards both on the inside of the door and the outside of the door. And major things happened within the room. The room sort of filled with a green mist. The orthopedic surgeon set the compound fracture with the being and had kind of a download of information. I don't have exactly what the being said to the orthopedic surgeon, but Dr. Lear has some of that information. And the military people that were there just told the orthopedic surgeon, he just said, fix it. Just a demand. And of course, the orthopedic surgeon didn't know what this was all about. It came out later. But the being healed itself. It took about 24 hours, and the bone totally healed itself. They had that capability. So that's an alien. Now, I can tell you more about the J-Rod, which is part of the human family in the future. And that's a major part of this story, which most people don't get. When you see these UFOs flying around, they're flying time machines. They warp space-time. And that's why when people fire at them, there's no result, because you're going into another dimension, and that dimension nullifies whatever armaments that we shoot at them.
No, that's a theory that I believe in, that these flying saucers, these aliens are, maybe humans from the future traveling back in time to visit, our present day. I want to ask you a couple questions. Let's start with this one. Why do you think they named the alien J-Rod?
Why did they name him that, you said?
Yes. Any maybe reasoning behind
Yeah,
that?
the code name. Yeah, it's when this particular his real name is Kealau. That was held secret for a long time, but now it's out. His real name is Kealau. And when he crashed near Kingman, Arizona in 1953, the military has a unit called the Sigma Unit. And these are linguists and psychologists that are able to interact with these beings that come here. And so they are able to translate whatever language the beings project to the humans, and back and forth. So in the initial stages, the J-Rod pointed to the 10th letter on the keyboard, which is J, and also pointed to a bar code, which is just a bar, which is an Egyptian Mayan symbol for 5. So naturally, whenever a human talks to another human, where are you from? Well, I'm from Kansas City. I'm from New York. Well, so they asked this particular being, where are you from? And he said 15, 10, and 5 for 15 light years from planet Earth. And his home base was on Zeta Reticuli, which ties in and corroborates the Betty at Barney Hill story, because the beings that abducted Betty at Barney Hill said the same thing. And Betty Hill, when she was hypnotized and given instructions to explain where this being was from, and another woman constructed a 3D image of it, and she didn't know astronomy, and lo and behold, they found out that this existed. This Zeta Reticuli, there's two, the binary star system. So then I'm told by my research that there's a halfway point between Zeta Reticuli and planet Earth. There's like a jump gate there, so they assemble there and then come to Earth. So I know people that study this it's very controversial about this, because that's what most people say. They're so far away they can't get here. Well, Michio Kaku has said on numerous occasions that, wait a minute, they can fold space-time. It isn't a linear journey. And there's a wonderful TV program called Wormholes and Sliders. And so Hollywood's gotten on board this thing. I'm really pleased with that, because they're conditioning the people about how these beings travel Earth time and come here. And they're coming here in droves. I only know of 4 for sure, but the literature has 57 or, maybe 100 and some on. But I can only, from my information, address the 4 that I know about.
Ron, I wanted to ask you about some of the technology that we received. Obviously, this boom of technology in civilian hands can be attributed to, ET crashes and what we've done with them. I wanted to ask you what the difference between Yellow Book and Looking Glass. And before I do that, also, I heard a nice theory that says we did find weapons of mass destruction when we went to Iraq, but it wasn't nuclear or chemical weapons. It was actually Project Looking Glass, which could be a Stargate. Can you tell our listeners about that?
Yes, I can. What Dr. Burrish has told me, it's in my videos, it's on the website in the store area, is that when Saddam Hussein was creating all the problems, I don't know if people really noticed, but where the green zone is, Saddam Hussein had created a theme park there, a Sumerian theme park with all kinds of structures. And what I'm told from my research is that he had devices that could actually teleport people from one dimension to another. It's not the Looking Glass proper. The Looking Glass has that capability, but this is a different kind of device. And your listeners will realize, when our military units went into Iraq in 103, the first place they went to was the Baghdad Museum. And they didn't blow the doors. They had actual explosives. I mean, they had actually had keys. They didn't need explosives. And we wanted to get those devices that Saddam Hussein had stored there, because that's one of the big things that's going on. We had to disassemble these devices, because as our solar system goes through the plane of the galactic, it triggers certain things in the dust cloud. So we found out that Saddam Hussein had given some of this technology to Muammar Gaddafi. So our military went and talked to Muammar Gaddafi and said, those things that Saddam gave you, well, you saw what happened to him. We'll forgive you what happened at Lockerbie 800 and make you richer than you could ever imagine, but you need to give us those devices. And Gaddafi, he was a very smart person and handed it over. So that's back during
Ron,
during the
we are going on a break. All you listeners out there, stay tuned. We'll be right back in a short minute just to continue where we are. That's right, we are back live on air, Third Phase of Moon Radio here on Revolution Radio. Just before we continue on with our guest, just a reminder for everybody, next Thursday, 5/16, we have Yvonne Smith, the 23rd, Robert Salas, the 30th, Dr. Greer. Also, make sure you check out Alien Human Project, a feature-length film on Dr. Lear, produced by the Cousins brothers and myself, yours truly, on Third Phase of Moon at YouTube. And our guest, Ron Gardner, has a disclosure website. Everybody out there listening, check it out. It's www.area51jrod.com. area51jrod.com. Now, Mr. Gardner, right before we went to the break, we were talking about how Saddam gave the technology to Gaddafi and how we went to Gaddafi and told him to look what happened to Saddam. Can we pick up where we left off?
Yeah, he was pretty smart in that way. But your listeners or viewers, if they can go to my website and check out the JROD EBE, there's links to it and explains it in great detail. But we could continue with this part of it, but I think we need to address Area 51 a little bit more, because that's where I'm going to have, I don't have it right now, I have some of it, I'll have actual 3D depictions of the most secret part of the most secret base in the world. Now, I've been studying this subject for over 30 years, and I've been working with this Dan Burry story for 10 years. So I'm amazed that I've gotten all this information. So what that means to the ufological community is that people on the inside want this information out. Otherwise, I wouldn't have all this information. I wouldn't have 3D depictions of the most secret part of the base. So, Bob Lazar, when he came out, I was in Las Vegas when he got that first interview in '89. That's what really ginned up my interest in Area 51, because I knew John Lear is a good friend of mine, and he absolutely backed everything that Bob Lazar said. So I know in UFO communities they kind of look askance at Bob Lazar, but he was right on the money.
I want to ask you, Ray, about these 3D renditions. Would we be able to get the material from you, some products, so we could, get it out to Third Phase of viewers worldwide? How are you going to be able to?
It can be. We have to convert it. I have some of it ready to go. I haven't put it up on the site yet, but that's a possibility in the future. Yes, we can do this.
That would be absolutely amazing. I want to get back to J-Rod again. I feel sorry for the being himself. Let me ask you. He was in prison.
Yeah, I do too. I felt sorry for him.
How was he treated at Area 51? Was he treated like a criminal, or was he continuously, as an abductee would have to go through a lot of traumatic experience, being probed and things along these lines? Basically they reversed it on him?
Well, he actually came here from Zeta Reticuli as a sacrificial lamb. He came here to have his genomic structure change because he had a neuropathy disease. It's very painful. A friend of mine has had it. And so he came here so that our scientists could change his genome, which will then change us in the future, and we won't have this terrible disease. Now, they weren't totally successful. They were partially successful, but they kept him on the 5th level down below Papoose Mountain, and he called himself captive because that's how he felt, because he wasn't allowed to interact with his fellows if they came to visit him and so forth. And he had to have a special atmosphere. His normal oxygen and nitrogen, but with about 5% extra hydrogen, because his lungs needed that extra hydrogen to function. So they had him there. He was interrogated. Our military called him names, called him Stumpy and Bright Eyes, and sort of made fun of him. But the main thing that really irritates me is that they would not allow him to have clothes. Now think of Abu Ghraib and what's happening in Guantanamo. Our military mindset is just I just can't understand it. He wanted to wear clothes, but he wasn't allowed to. But that allowed Dr. Dan Burrish, when he was taking the nearly 300 tissue samples in the 94-95 time frame, he was able to actually see the genitalia of this being, which I have that up on my site. I have a drawing of the J-Rod's genitalia. Now, nobody has that information. They had internal fertilization. They, had elimination similar to humans. Well, the only thing is they had to be hydrated. They were drinking liquid all the time. So that was a major part of the way they were handling him. And when Dr. Burrish, I need to get into this because this explained a lot. In 95, he had been working with this J-Rod for 2 years, taking tissue samples. He had a special PINS gun that the tissue sample, it's on my site. All of this, you can see this on my site. And the tissue would be extracted from the nerve of the upper appendage of the J-Rod person. So then in 95, after 2 years of interacting, for the first time in 2 years, the J-Rod took a step toward Dr. Dan Burrish, the military microbiologist. This shocked Dr. Burrish. He considered him a friend, but at the same time, that movement startled him. He stepped back, caught his heel on the graded floor of the clean sphere, and at the top of my site, you can see the 3D drawing of the clean sphere. And the J-Rod didn't jump on him, but he sort of waddled over to him and climbed up on his chest and downloaded all this information into Dr. Dan Burrish Crane. Burrish was his name. Crane was his given name at birth. He's gone back to that. And so the military people at Area 51S4 kind of joked that the J-Rod downloaded the Galactic Encyclopedia into Dr. Dan Burrish. And so people say, well, what was a part of that? And part of it was a book that he wrote. Dr. Dan Burrish wrote a book called Egos Disobey, Inca City, which was all about a city on Mars. So in our future, we're going to Mars. I know President Obama said we're not going to, but according to my information, and we are going to Mars, and maybe we're even there now. That's a whole other discussion, which I'm not ready to talk about.
Ron, you have a lot of information on your site. We want all the listeners out there to check it out. But, after this, Blake's going to do a great little movie on Third Phase of Moon where everybody's going to be able to see this. Can we showcase the world what's on your site on Third Phase of Moon?
Yeah, you can put your site up. I've been tasked to get this information out. Dr. Dan Burrish is the
No, we're saying we're going to put it on our channel. We'll show pages from your site, and of course, offer everyone links to your site.
Sure, no, that's fine. That's my job. I was holding off putting my site up. It just went up this week. I had to wait till after the citizens' hearing was over. There are certain protocols that I had to adhere to, but now, yeah, I want to blast this to the world. So you guys are welcome to it.
Good. All you listeners out there, make sure you check out Area51JRod.com and also Third Phase of Moon on YouTube, where you can see all the great footage, including this interview, and you'll be actually seeing what we're talking about. We have a UFO hunter, Joe Kiernan, who was on the last hour with us. He has a question for you, Gardner.
Okay.
Ron Gardner.
Sure.
Joe?
Yes, hello. Thank you for taking the time to answer a question for me.
I'm happy to, Joe.
So many good questions were already covered, and I know you know the topic very well. But just to quickly ask a question, you were just on a minute ago when you were saying J-Rod, they required drinking a lot of liquids.
Right.
What was the liquid? Was it primarily water? Was it strictly
primarily water? Yeah, primarily water, as far as I know.
And it was just was that their overall their means of nutrition?
No, there was other nutrition. I never asked Dr. Burish about that because the clean sphere was lifted up from what they call the ambassadorial suite, which was on a lower level, where they took care of the J-Rod. But they're always concerned about contamination. Dr. Burish and the other military scientists had to wear what they call a totally encapsulated suit. It's a space suit when they were interacting with the J-Rod. If you see my site, at the top of it, you can see actual drawings of this. Because we didn't want to. Yeah, we didn't want to contaminate the extraterrestrial, and we didn't want him to contaminate us. So all these 50 years, he's been isolated, and all the people that interacted with him had to do it in these totally encapsulated suits. Now, this brings up something, and I just want to mention. We mentioned the Varginha case. When Dr. Lear and I went to Varginha, we interviewed a woman whose husband was a military policeman who had actually carried this being in the patrol car, and he died like 6 weeks later, bleeding from every orifice in his body because he was contaminated. So that shows this other creature in Brazil in '96 that it was dangerous for humans to interact. So that's why that's a corroboration for me that what I know about the J-Rod here, they were very concerned. It was like the Andromeda Strain. I use that. Dr. Burish mentions 2 films all the time, is Andromeda Strain and the Dustin Hoffman movie Outbreak. If you want to know what Area 51 S4, the bottom levels look like, just go watch Outbreak with Dustin Hoffman, and it's very similar. The ramps, the way they isolate the being and everything is very similar to that movie. Well, I need to go back a little more history. In 1983, I was working for a mortgage company in Beverly Hills, and the woman manager and I went to lunch one day, and she said that her brother worked at Area 51. And I said, "Oh, really? I'd love to talk to him." So she said, "Yeah, well, she could set it up." Every time I tried to set up a meeting with her brother, he said there was a white van with a dish on top cruising his neighborhood, so I could never set up an appointment. But what he told her and told me on the phone was that when he was a low-level person at Area 51, he wasn't, he was a welder or something, and he would go by this one office, and there was this being in there, and the office was all disheveled with books everywhere, and this guy had one blue sock and one brown sock. So her brother went in there one day and told this person, "Why don't you clean this place up? It's a mess." And this being said verbatim, "Look, fellow, I just put on this body every day just like you put on your coveralls, so get out of here and leave me alone." So that was my first in '83. And then the Balthazar happened in '89. So then Bill Hamilton was one of the major researchers. He and I were close friends. And whenever we get together, I worked in Beverly Hills, and he worked as a computer specialist at UCLA, so we would meet in Westwood to talk about all these UFO stories that we were researching. And so that's how I came in contact with Dr. Burish and the J-Rod. At the same time, I produced a radio show in San Diego on Truth Seeker Radio, and one of the people that were part of the Truth Seeker organization was the son-in-law of the CIA agent. And so he told me about his father-in-law. And so I began researching that for 15 years. I've only come out with this in the last month. But I've vetted his whole family and him. I've seen the documentation of his working both in the Army as a cryptographer and working for the CIA at the same time. That's quite often true with the CIA people. They wear two hats, and they use code names, and that's that whole story. So I first became aware of this particular individual in '97 time frame. Then I contacted Linda Howe. You remember what she said at the hearing? That she had interviewed him. Well, I'm the one that set all that up. And then I set it up with Richard Dolan for February the 5th of this year. And so I have corroboration both from Richard Dolan and from Linda Howe. Linda Howe interviewed this particular individual for 10, 15 hours on audio tape, but she never got the videotape, but I have the videotape. And that's going to be part of the documentary that Just Cause Productions and Stephen Bassett are working on.
Yeah, and what you managed to put together with that interview with a CIA retiree was absolutely amazing. I think Joe Kiernan has a question for you, Mr. Gardner.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, yes. Now, I was curious with J-Rod and I guess our future ancestors, when they do come here, are they coming here for the purpose of, as you said, sacrificial lambs? Are they coming here with purposes of benefiting us in the future, or do they have other intentions?
Yes, they are, and Dr. Burris identifies them. The J-Rod that we're talking about, his real name is Kealah, Cealah. It's on my site. He came here as a sacrificial lamb to help his people. And he was very sad because he missed his family back on Zeta Reticuli. He missed his wife and son and wanted to go back there. And so, and from Dan's point of view, it's hard to conceptualize this, but he's from 52,000 years in our future. But on the same ship that crashed in Kingman, Arizona, there were the other ones that were there were from 46,000 years in our future. And they don't have the best interest of humans at heart. It's okay, but part of what our military has been doing all these years is helping them, and then they're helping us with technology. And those beings that were on the ship, they actually, one was an engineer, an ET engineer. So when Bill Uhouse was working with them at Los Alamos in Area 51, when they were back engineering the UFO, they had to make it larger so our guys could seat themselves in it. And they didn't get the things quite right, so then the ET engineer would come over with a formula and write it out. And our engineers were being instructed by the ET engineer how to build the craft.
So this just goes and proves that aliens and humans are working together, and the government's been hiding from it.
Absolutely.
Ron, we also have Preston Dennett here, MUFON researcher of over 23 years, author of 15 amazing books, 2 more on their way. Preston, you have a question for Ron, right?
I do. Hi, Ron.
Yeah, hello, Preston. I remember when you researched that crop circle in Laguna Beach. Isn't that the one that you first got back then?
That was a while back.
It's a long time ago, I know. But I was impressed with your work there.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. I really enjoy it. But so I'm really excited to speak with you. And I've got a question which I think you might find kind of interesting. Fate Magazine did an experiment. This was like 5 or 10 years ago, which they published in their magazine, where they asked their readers to remote view Area 51 or astral project to it and see what they came up with.
Really? I'd love to see what they had to say.
Oh, the results were amazing, and they were really consistent. They all said that it was many levels underground. It was very large. They said there was reverse engineering going on. There was ET hardware. They said there was live beings there, some of whom were aware that they were being remote viewed.
Yes, that's true.
But what I found most fascinating, and this came up, several people came up with this, and I had never heard it before. They said that they detected that some of the people who work there with the ETs have been augmented, had their bodies changed in some ways by the ETs so that their health was improved or that they could live much longer than the average human. I'm wondering if
I haven't heard that, but that doesn't surprise me that there's some kind of genetic manipulation.
Right.
That's what abduction researcher David says, that there's a hybridization going on. So that wouldn't surprise me if that's true. I don't know that from my research, but it sounds as a possibility.
Certainly, they're doing it to the people they abduct. So,
that's pretty well established by the abduction research.
And another question, I've had several people tell me that there are tunnels under Area 51 that lead to Edwards Air Force Base and to San Clemente Island, I believe it is, in Southern California, and other areas. And I was wondering if you could comment on that or what you have heard about.
Well, I don't know this from Dr. Dan Burrish or from Bill Uhouse, but John Lear is a good friend, and John Lear said that that's true. John Lear, Learjet's inventor's son, he says there's actually a tunnel from the Pacific Ocean, like the submarines can come through into Nevada. There's a vast tunnel network from there to probably to Edwards, to Nellis, and maybe even as far as Los Alamos. It wouldn't surprise me.
Wow, that's a vast.
Bill Uhouse did say that he was in some of the tunnels, and they were wide enough for two semi-trucks with a train in the center, 70 or 80 feet wide. He was actually in those tunnels under Area 51.
I wanted to know, Mr. Gardner, about technology leaked from Area 51, or has any of it trickled down to the public and some of the things that we're have as everyday devices? Is it leaked information from Area 51, some kind of technology that somehow helped mankind as of recent, or are they still suppressing?
Yeah, well, if you're familiar with the Philip Corso story, I've done a documentary about him. It's on my website. Corso says that, very explicitly in his book, The Day After Roswell, and Bill Burns and I are good friends, and UFO Magazine. He's on the History Channel all the time. But Corso explains that the computer chip, Teflar, all kinds of information came from the craft at Roswell. So, at the hearings, I don't know if you heard that part, but one of I think it was the senator from Alaska, someone in the panel had said that Ben Rich, who is a former president of Lockheed Skunk Works, said that the Air Force gave him a contract to take E.T. home. Now, I actually have that recording when Ben Rich said that at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And I've also interviewed Jan Harzan, who's head of MUFON Orange County, where he heard Ben Rich say that at UCLA. So, and I don't know where this is true, but I'll just state it, that I've talked to people inside aerospace companies and pilots and so forth, and two different ones that didn't know each other. And I always say, well, what percentage of the sightings are ours and what percentage are theirs? And both these people said that 60 to 70% are ours. Now, that just amazed me. I didn't think that would be, I thought it would be just the reverse. So all of these sightings out there, and I've personally given up on sightings 20 years ago. I want to talk about who's inside that light that's floating around in space, and that's why I focused on Area 51 and Los Alamos, because that's where the beings are. So as far as what's been come from Area 51 S4 proper to the public, I don't know. I don't know what. There's probably research that has come as far as genetic manipulation and so forth, but that's above my pay grade. At some point, I can talk to Dr. Burrish about that because I'm very close to him. And he's almost like my stepson. I was the best man in his wedding, and I know his story backwards and forwards.
Mr. Gardner, I have something to ask you about MJ-12. We talked about before we went on air about Carl Sagan. I mean, he was like a big disinformation guy, yet at the same time he was trying to kind of, talk about ETs, with SETI. Can you tell us his link to MJ-12 and also give us a MJ-12 names? So you told me about an admiral.
Yeah, Admiral McConnell is head of Majestic 12 right now. And he's like the godfather for Dr. Dan Burrish. There's over 40 biologists that met untimely death. But Dr. Dan Burrish, he was 48 or 49 in February the 2nd. And he's still alive. He's suffered terribly from a lot of different things, but McConnell is the one that's protected him. But as far as Carl Sagan, I have this from 3 different sources, that Carl Sagan was read into the program and was, encouraged to debunk all of this. And but I think he had a turn of heart at the end of his life because he wrote the book Contact and a wonderful movie with Jodie Foster about contact. And that brings up something else, which I would like to just put out here between you and your many viewers or listeners. One of the books that's important I read early on, I think it's called Omega Point, and it was written by Dr. Roger Lear's cousin, Kenneth Ring. And in that book, they linked the ET appearances with deceased relatives. And if you remember in the movie Contact, Jodie Foster, when she went through the dimensional shift, who did she meet? She met her deceased father. So I think Carl Sagan was leaving a legacy to the people with that movie. I think he had a change of heart. And there's another part of the story. I don't know if you know who Carl Sagan's first wife was.
No.
She teaches at Amherst University. And
we're coming on a break. Everyone stay tuned. Third Phase of the Moon Radio will be right back. That's right. We are back on live on Third Phase of the Moon Radio, and we're host Dr. J. Andy Elias on the phone with Ron Gardner, Blake Cousins, UFO hunter Joe Kiernan, also co-host and MUFON researcher and author Preston Dennett. Before we go forward, just a few quick more announcements. Remind everybody next week on May 16th, same time, same place, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have Yvonne Smith, the 23rd, Robert Salas, and the 30th, Dr. Greer. Also, make sure if you captured anything amazing, you send it to Third Phase of the Moon via Skype or Facebook. We're also looking for the best footage. If you have a footage of an entity or a footage of a UFO, send it. Make sure you're saying it for the Revolution Radio contest to win an autographed book from Preston Dennett. Make sure you check out Ron Gardner's site that we're all talking about, which is area51jrod.com. You'll see links on Third Phase of the Moon when we actually get this out up there. And other than that, let's return back to where we were real quick. For all the listeners out there, the callers, area code 347-474-7228, extension 818. Again, if you want to call in, area code 347-474-7228, extension 818. Right before we went back on break, Mr. Gardner, you were talking about Carl Sagan, his wife, and MJ-12. Can we pick that up again?
Yeah, I will. It's really interesting because Carl Sagan's first wife, Lynn Margulis, she teaches biology. I think it's at Amherst. And she and her son, Carl Sagan's son, wrote a book. I don't remember the name of it, but they're very strong environmentalists. And at some point, I would like to have Dr. Burrish meet Lynn Margulis because they are very similar. Dr. Burrish Crane is really into helping the environment, and he has protocols to clean up the water supply. That's a major project that he's had from teenagers on. But back to Majestic, you mentioned Admiral McConnell. J. Mike McConnell, in my humble informed opinion, is the head of Majestic 12. And they changed some of the hierarchy. I know who all the 11 members are. I'm not going to identify them here. I will identify them on my site later on when the time is right. But McConnell is a moral compass of Majestic. He's a very honest person. So all of you researchers out there, if you don't believe me, just go find Admiral McConnell. I told this to Richard Dolan, and I think he's written a letter for McConnell. I don't know what's happened. But McConnell either will just turn away and neither confirm nor deny, or he may say, yes, I know who Ron Garner is, I know who Dr. Burish is. If he says that, then that is a whole new game, because we have the head of Majestic 12 stating that the Burish story is true. He's a poster boy for disclosure, and for whatever crazy reason, Ron Garner, the media guy, is supposed to make it happen. So that's why I've researched these for 15, 20 years, and now in 2013, it started in 2012, I started releasing this information a little at a time. But Dr. Burish has told me that with the Looking Glass, they can see approximations of future events. Not exactly, but approximations. And the 16 time frame is really dicey. And if that is going to be improved, we need to develop our spirituality. I've been a TM meditator my whole life. And we need to develop our spirituality and help each other, instead of all this greed that's going on. And I'm hoping if this takes place, then we'll have a better future. But if not, well, there's catastrophes in our future which we don't want to talk about.
I want to ask you, Ray Gardner, about, again, J-Rod. I just keep going back to J-Rod, but he's, the most fascinating.
Of course, yeah, I know. It's an amazing thing.
It is. And, has there been any leaked video footage out there that anything from Area 51 shown?
Yeah, there's been some that were purported to be, but when I showed it to Dr. Burish, they said, no, there's stuff on YouTube, but there's nothing as far as I know. There's some footage of a being, light shining down on him, and he's drooling. I thought that might be true because the J-Rod, he was very sick. He was throwing up, and they had to clean him up all the time. So I thought maybe that video was true, but Dr. Burish said no, that wasn't him. It could have been another being there. I don't know. But the thing is, they have hundreds of film and document of Dr. Burish with this J-Rod in the clean sphere. There's cameras all over, and the whole facility. You can't be anywhere in that facility. There's a camera on you and a guard with an automatic weapon. It makes it very difficult to work there because the atmosphere is so oppressive with all these guards everywhere. And Bob Lazar said that. Bill Hughes has said that, and Dr. Burish Crane has said that too. It's really difficult to work there under those conditions. And the scientists are paid well, but no amount of money can, in my idea of the way things should be, to have that kind of oppressive oversight of your whole life, the rest of your life. Because once you go there, you sign those documents, and you have a handler. You have a handler that comes and checks on you once or twice a year, and you have to undergo polygraph tests, and you have to go through all kinds of things because they want to keep this wrapped up. And it's terrible. It's a crime against science that they have these scientists. I know a lot of other facilities where scientists are doing things, and it's very difficult for them to work under those conditions. It doesn't matter how much money you make.
Well, let me ask you this, Ron. You're releasing a lot of sensitive information. I don't know if you've covered this yet or not, but have you ever been threatened in any way with all this information on the website?
My car was broken into 3 times. Master tapes were stolen. I think one of them was an actual vandalism, but the other 2, I'm certain, were black ops. And I told Dr. Burish about that. But Dr. Burish was, in 2005, the spring, he was on the board of Majestic 12. He was number 9, the Majestic organization. And when I told him in 2005 that I had a little bit of harassment, he put the order out and to stand down as far as I'm concerned. I haven't had any trouble since then.
So on some level, they're agreeing that you let this information out then.
Yeah, well, when he was on the Majestic 12 committee in April of 2005, he called for a vote, and the vote was 6-5 for disclosure. There's one abstention because it has to do with the protocols of the Freemasons. They don't want to tie, basically. So then in September of '05, the vote was taken again. This time was 8-3 for disclosure for him. And people get confused. They say, well, if they voted for it, no, it's not voted for the committee itself. It's for Dr. Dan Burry's Crane to release the information, tell the world. And I have the actual documents from Admiral O'Connell that is directing and ordering is basically his subordinate, Dr. Burry's, to tell the world. So that's what we're doing now. How could I get all this information about the most secret part of the most secret base unless somebody wanted it out?
Right.
There were leaks along the way, and people were harmed, and people and untimely deaths. But I haven't had any trouble since '05.
You know, Ron, before we went on air, we were talking about several things. One, you just mentioned about that vote for disclosure. We talked about a couple movies. The movie V, Independence Day, and Avatar. How does that fit in with what's going on?
Well, I've been in film, I'm involved in film at various levels my whole life. I was involved with various television programs as a line producer and so forth. I'm very keen about movies. And the television series V, and Hollywood wants the people to be afraid because that's how they sell tickets. So the whole V thing had to do with fear. Now, it's very interesting about Independence Day. I have a lot to say about that. We probably don't have enough time in this segment. But the people, I don't know if you know, when they first decided to make the movie Independence Day, they went to the military and they solicited their help. And they said, oh, yeah, we'll help you. But then when they told about it was Area 51, then the military backed off. So the producers of the movie Independence Day had to use National Guard troops for the scenes in the movie. So, and there's another important thing. I've never told this before in public, but I'll release it now. At Area 51, they have what they call the wise men. There are 3 older men that walk around in white coats and white socks and white shoes, and they live there their whole life. And it's their job to try and make everything done in a very professional way. But in the movie Independence Day, you remember when the president's going to view the craft, and there's a scientist with long hair and a white coat, and he runs up there and says, "Oh, Mr. President, blah blah blah." Well, that was based actually on these wise men that actually live at Area 51 S4. They approached Dr. Burry's to be one of them, but he said no, he couldn't live there. It's like a commitment that he would never be able to stay there all the time. But these 3 men, they're there, and they live there as a permanent.
It's interesting with Independence Day. Ronald Emmerich was trying to get permission from the U.S. military to, get access to the aircraft carriers, jets, and they're ready to go for it. They were actually ready to participate, because it was kind of go America, had a good thing going for, United States propaganda anyway. What happened is that in the script, they brought in the Area 51 scene, and the Pentagon and the military said, well, if you cut that scene out, we'll go ahead and help. Yeah. But then the director standed strong and said, no, we're going to keep it in. So the military dropped out of any help. I think Joe Kiernan has a question for you.
Okay, hello, Joe.
Yeah. Yes, hi. We're in Arizona where J. Rod's craft had crashed. There's a lot of people that are that raise the questions that they're also there for a lot of particular minerals that are necessary for them in the future.
That's true.
Are they also coming here with interest for elements for protection of their own species in the future, or something that was not?
Yes, and the main element is boron. Boron is very valuable. There's only like 2 or 3 places on Earth that has it, and I think at China Lake is where there's a lot of it in that general, area between California and Nevada. So yeah, boron is very important.
So the heavy metal groups would be most important.
Well,
I have other people that have discovered uranium mines in Europe between France and Spain. that the ancient people, thousands of years, ancient aliens were digging out uranium there. I have that from other sources.
Yeah,
So yeah, there's different minerals, and they can take these things back to their planet, and it's important to them. And the gold, Zechariah Sitchin, that whole story.
I have no doubt that that's true, because there's a very strong link between UFO sightings and landings and mines, across the world. So, absolutely, I see that link.
I was wondering if it was somehow necessary for transportation for J-Rod and his people to come back and forth.
No, not those minerals. They have the technology is Stargate. That's what I call my company, Stargate, because that's the key to everything. If you dig down into it, Einstein-Rosen bridge is the scientific name for this. So if you people can just Google that, Einstein-Rosen bridge phenomena. Michio Kaku talks about it, and all of these wonderful movies, like Wormholes and Sliders, and they're addressing that issue. I think these beings are coming and going through these different portals, and
it really makes time more of a physical understanding.
That's right, and that's what I think that Hitler was doing too. Hitler was contacting these people. That's a whole other story, which I don't want to get into right now. But these beings were coming and going. The Aryan race, and he was studying the Vimanas in India and going after the technology in Tibet and all that. History Channel has done a wonderful job in exploring all that.
Yeah, he sure had a lot of the right pieces of the puzzle for going in the right direction there. Right.
So, in this other series, which a friend of mine's son is the editor of it, UFO Files Disclosure, it's on KTLA on Channel 5 on Saturday nights at 11 o'clock. A wonderful show, just great information. So it's getting out there, and this brings up the issue, which is that the ET people, this is really important, I'm glad I remembered to say this, they've actually signed treaties with these beings, and part of the treaty says that they must release this information. They changed the timeline at different times, but the basic idea is the ET people want this information out. And so that's the reason that Dr. Burish and Bill Uhouse and Bob Lazar and myself and other people have this information, because it's our job, our task, to put this out to the public.
What is the timetable then? I mean, how long are we talking until we get full, complete disclosure of all this?
I don't know that. I've ruminated about that on my mind all the time. At different time frames, I think originally there was supposed to be a major disclosure in the 1980s, because Linda Howe was contracted with HBO to get this information out, and Richard Doty
I remember that.
Was and then they did that other series in '89. So I think it was supposed to be, but there's some reason that they had to change the timeline. I don't know. I know a little bit about it, but not enough to really discuss it on your air here. But there is a time frame, and that part of what the military is concerned about is the convergent timeline paradox, because when you change something, it isn't that the kill your grandfather idea. It's the idea that a new time continuum starts. So you may kill your grandfather, but he still lives in another dimension, and that's very confusing. And so when they change the timeline, it's very dangerous, and that's why part of the reason that they confiscated these Stargate technology. It's hooked up with the Looking Glass on my site. I have a brief description of the Looking Glass. The Looking Glass has cameras, 4 of them, and they have noble gases, argon and other things, and they project in there, and they can see approximations of the future and past events. So, and also if it's rotated in 45 degrees, it can be a teleportation device too. I don't know a lot about that. But this technology is just burgeoning out, and the whole UFO community needs to focus on my site and the other sites on Citizens Hearing. They did the whistleblowers that were there. Eventually, I want to have a Hall of Fame for these whistleblowers that have come forward, risking life and limb and their families and everything to get this information out. And now it's really flowing big time. I think this year could be the year where we have disclosure. John Podesta has said it. Stephen Bassett has made quite a plea to Podesta to have Podesta and his group release this information, because he wrote a foreword to Leslie Kean's book. He was the transition head for Obama, and he was head of Clinton's administration. So he's a key figure, and I'm hoping that John Podesta will give the green light to UFO researchers and put his weight behind the disclosure. I'm hoping that he will.
Ron, I wanted to ask you about the Citizens Hearing. I was a little pessimistic going in because, Stan Friedman and Gordon Cooper and others testified in front of the Congress in 1968. But this time it was a little different, because over the course of the 5 days, you saw the transformation from skeptics to true believers that something is going on, and some civilizations, plural, are visiting us. Do you think this is going to have a major impact in disclosure? I mean, what's it going to take to get disclosure to happen this year?
Well, I had a long talk with Stephen Bassett just today about that I think I was concerned, as you were, that the Congress people that were going to be chosen, would give a big yawn, but it was jaw-dropping. They were transfixed. It was amazing how that information flowed into their minds. And especially Burroughs and Peniston from Rendlesham Forest, and they got behind that. They want to help them get their records out from the Air Force. They were really engaged, and I'm hoping this now will go to the UN. When I talked to Stephen Bassett today, he said they're pursuing that. I have some strong connections in the UN. I can really be beneficial about that. And someone said that there was a protocol back in '68 where they could use that now to open up a certain committee or with the UN. I could have brought a lot of other people from other countries that I've researched, but there wasn't that much time. But the people they had, it was just perfect. I couldn't agree with you more. It was just wonderful, the panel, and I think it's a game changer. I really do. So many of the X conferences and the conferences that go on are press conferences for a couple hours and it's gone. But this is 5 days and it's archived. It's going to be in 5 different languages. I can't see how it's not going to make a major contribution to disclosure. But at the same time, we have to know the media is infiltrated by intelligence people, and they put a kibosh on it. Terry Hansen, I would like to have had him. He wrote a book about all this, about the media and the intelligence groups. But go ahead.
I just wanted to say we're getting near the end of the show. We have a few minutes left. I wanted to mention everybody check out the Alien Project, the Roger Leir
Alien Human Project.
The Alien Human Project, right there at Third Phase of Moon. Roger Leir removing extraterrestrial implants from abductees. Check it out. And also,
let me inject something here. Dr. Roger Leir gave Dr. Dan Burrish one of the implants. And Dr. Roger Leir, he says it on my site, you can go to testimonials, that Dr. Burrish Crane gave the best analysis of an implant of anybody that he's ever taken it to in the past. And I have it on my site. You can download it.
And we're going to have Dr. Burrish here soon one day, right?
I can work it out, yes. We have to develop certain protocols. But
yeah, for sure. We will.
Yeah.
Blake,
do you think we could get Bob Lazar on as well?
In the right situation. I'm good friends with John Lear, and that's a long story, but it could happen, yeah. But he's, that's the thing about Dr. Burish. He's a scientist, and Bob Lazar is a scientist, and they don't want to write books and give conferences and make videos. They just want to do their science. So they don't want to be pulled away from their scientific endeavors. In the case of Dr. Burish Crane, that's different because he's been ordered by Majestic to get this information out.
They're true whistleblowers, and we'd love for the public to hear from them. But real quick, before the show ends, we want to remind all the listeners to make sure you check out everything we talked about on Ron Gardner's website, www.area51jrod.com. Again, area51jrod.com. Also, Alien Human Project on Third Phase of Moon. And Blake, of course, tell them if they've captured anything amazing.
This has been an incredible show, and with over 54 million views on Third Phase of Moon and 75,000 subscribers, we could get the information out real quick, and I really want to thank Mr. Ron Gardner for joining us right here at Third Phase of Moon, and I look forward to getting some material so we could spread the word.
Yes, we need to, because there's a groundswell, and that's what the ET people are happy with, is that the grassroots are the ones that are pushing this.
We are at the end of the show. Sorry, Ron. Everyone out there, Area 51.
Third phase. Third phase.